Welcome back, Irby Automotive Inc. Today we're in the office and we're going to talk about, I guess, recalls in a sense and how it affects your vehicle, whether you're here in the US or your vehicle's in another country. This was actually kind of requested by a viewer from Poland. So before we get started, if you guys don't mind, smash the subscribe button, thumbs up, and notification bell helps my small channel out. But it makes me feel good that there are people close to my backyard and all over watching my videos. And it's just fantastic to see it. And this viewer had said that they appreciated me putting out the video on these recalls and had a few other questions and wanted to kind of bring some voice or some information to the community of car buyers and owners. So their question was, as I think it was one of the recall Jeep videos on the Jeep Wrangler, and they had bought that new. They were the primary first owner, and they had moved the vehicle overseas, which I believe it's Poland. And if I got that wrong, my friend, I do apologize. It was early when I saw that comment. And they were subject to a big recall and they're having the issue. However, the dealers over there are covering it. And why is that? Well, in other countries, guys, when it comes to recalls, like I said, I do a ton of research on recall stuff because I want to get stuff out to consumers so they can get their car fixed before they end up in a pickle where the vehicle's dangerous or whatever. Well, in this circumstance, the dealer over there in Europe basically had refused to do it, didn't want to recognize this recall. Well, keeping in mind, each country is going to have its own set of parameters on how they handle recalls. There is no international universal way of handling recalls. So if Nahitsa here in the United States issues a recall and you had bought the car here and had it shipped over, really the only way to get that corrected quickly probably is to ship it back over, which would be astronomical prices. I couldn't even imagine to get the recall fixed. It probably costs more than the actual either repair or even the value of the vehicle. So then it comes down to the reasoning why behind it. Well, here in the United States, when a manufacturer finds a defect, they're required to notify Nahitsa and people very quickly. Not necessarily the owners, but to get this on the record. I think it's like 5 days or 7 days when they notice something and how they reach a recall level. It can be a safety recall. It can be a quality or something along those lines. The words are kind of leaving my mind talking about it. So it's kind of like a voluntary recall where they're like, hey, this is nothing big, but we need to fix it. Then there's obviously the safety ones they have to get out very quick. And then there is always a time lapse on, that information getting out to the consumers. And then of course the fix. Now, if we take the European Union over there, that would just be one circumstance. They have their own ideas. And just because it's a US recall, it doesn't really mean it. Well, it a lot of times comes down to money, right? If they don't want to recognize it and then they're not going to have to fix it. They're not going to have to spend the money. And even though you think as GM and Ford is this massive global thing, they also have their own separate little chunks of Ford over in Europe and China and everywhere else. And so it doesn't necessarily behoove them. Now, that doesn't mean that the recall won't be fixed or become an issue because in some countries, I think it's Colombia and Brazil, they're actually required to announce that once there's an actual fix or remedy. So if Ford over here in the United States says, hey, we have an engine problem, we're going to recall this engine, and we don't have the fix, but you're just being notified of the recall, it could take Ford however long. Over there, they're not even going to announce anything until Ford has came up with the remedy, right? And then they move forward to it. And in some countries like China, they're actually require the dealers to notify the customers. And in some countries, there's not any parameters at all. There's no safety regulations. There's very little reporting when it comes to registrations or VINs to even know where these owners are or who they were, who the car was even sold to. In a lot of countries, these vehicles pass hands quite quickly or often, and so it's hard to even track them down. So I would tell people along the lines is obviously look into where you're at when it comes to recalls. If you have a U.S. recall and a U.S. built vehicle purchased in the United States, you have it shipped somewhere else, I'll say you probably have a long road to go before you can actually get that addressed, if ever addressed, okay? And when you go over to your dealers in those countries and they say, well, we're not going to address it, we're not even going to recognize it, that doesn't mean it's over and done with. but it means you have even longer to wait. Now, when it's an engine failure or it's a super safety concern, then you really have to kind of get on the road of what is the most important to you and which one is the best budget wise and financial wise. If it was a safety concern and they can't fix it, they're not going to address it, and you've heard about this in the US, more than likely it's going to have the same problems as the US recall would have. Not always necessarily, but you'd have to then decide, do you want to put yourself in that position? Do you just get rid of the vehicle, which is not always optimal? Most people buy a car and expect to have it until they're tired of it, not have to dump it because it has issues. But I think this kind of just brings awareness. Like I said, they wanted to kind of bring this information out so people understood the negatives of buying something in the US, whether it's a car you can't get over here, or it's even a car that was built in Germany and shipped here that wouldn't have been sold here necessarily. That's probably not going to hit on the NHTSA registry when you check your VIN. So you'd have to then decide, do I trade it? Do I get rid of it? Do I sell it? Do I wait? Do I see what happens? Again, that's not a decision I can recommend across the board for anybody as an easy way to answer. All I can say is it's very, very intriguing because I do a lot of research on U.S. recalls, and like I said, I always put the NHTSA stuff, and I'll put the NHTSA down there, the link in the description below, so you can check any and all of your VINs of your vehicle. Again, safety recalls in the United States, as long as they're safety recalls, they're usually fixed for free, no matter if you're the first or 10th owner. If it's a voluntary recall on a consumer, man, that word is just slipping my mind. Anyway, like a quality control concern, they're recalling it. That may or may not be covered, but you can obviously check with your local dealer. But when it comes to across the world, I knew that they had different standards in each country. Like I said, over there, it might be something where they take, more restrictive standards on emissions or safety concerns. Some countries have no safety stuff at all in their cars, and it's not even a requirement necessarily to have certain safety stuff. So go to where you're currently at and look into your recall type center like our NHTSA here in the US and see what your vehicle falls into. Now, I would honestly say that if your vehicle is sold in the country, bought in the country where you currently live, and you are worried about a recall, then you probably have a much easier run to getting it corrected than you would one that's shipped from another country to another country. There's probably some type of legality of how that VIN's going to play out, or identification number, whatever you want to call it in that country. So it's just one of those things to keep in the back of your mind, guys. Always check for recalls. Be aware, purchasing a vehicle out of country and bringing it in, they might not have any type of recall stuff set up. And because most dealers are kind of franchisees of the bigger Dodge and GM and everybody, that they are their own dealership. There's separate owners. It's not like Ford owns every Ford dealership. Yes, there's a lot of legality there, but it doesn't mean that Ford can just walk in and do whatever they want at Phil Long Ford in Denver. So I would just say that, keeping in mind that when you have these extra little pieces of the puzzle, it may be hard to get stuff corrected. Not impossible. I think it's absolutely doable, but just keep in mind that if it is one of these concerns where you're losing an engine and you go out of pocket for it, to keep your receipts. And that way, once it comes out that they'll correct it in whatever country you're in or whatever, you can actually prove that you had some repairs done or you're at loss for it. But obviously, if you trade it, then you're not going to usually get any type of settlement or anything out of that. So I guess it's just kind of an informational talk about recalls US-wide and I guess worldwide, and how they're kind of handled and some of the pitfalls you can fall into if you're not careful. So I appreciate that viewer from way across the world getting a hold of me, and it was super cool to have a nice dialogue this morning about it. And I always appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to catch you on the next one.